Chris here, and welcome to my channel. In today's 5 on Friday, I'm here to share with you my top 5 standalones of 2024. And there were 7 books that kind of stood out, so it was really hard to narrow it down to 5, but this is what I have chosen for my top 5 standalones of 2024. First up, I'm going to mention The Backyard Bird Chronicles. This is a nonfiction that looks into the author's life as a bird watcher. We kind of see these like journal entries where she describes what is going on in her yard over the course of, I think it's a couple of years. We also get drawings interspersed throughout the book of various birds and situations she's describing in the text of the book. I have gotten massively into birds this year, so this was an easy 5 stars. I had such a fun time with this. I loved learning about all the different birds she got to see in her yard, all of the antics, the way she started to learn to tell them apart, what kind of food they preferred, and just all of the amazing stories she chose to share about her adventures with these birds. I absolutely love this book. It's not going to be for everybody because if you don't care about birds, you're probably not going to love this. But like I said, it is something I fell in love with this year, so I absolutely had a brilliant time with that one. Next, I'll mention Hazel Bly and the Deep Blue Sea, and we have a Cielo. Come here, over here. Don't knock the camera. Don't knock the camera. Thank you. You silly. So yes, Hazel Bly and the Deep Blue Sea by Ashley Herring Blake. This made me sob. In this one, we follow Hazel, who ends up moving to Maine with her mama a couple of years ago in an accident that left her with massive anxiety and a scar on her face. Her mom died, and her mama have been traveling ever since and not really settling in one place for very long. And this year they end up spending the summer in Rose Harbor, Maine. Her mama ends up running into an old friend named Claire, who has a daughter named Lemon, who is Hazel's age. And Lemon cannot stop talking about the well-known myth of the town, Rosemaid, who is a mermaid. And so we see Hazel struggling with her grief over losing her mom and her anxiety, and also being curious about this myth and about Lemon. And like I said, it emotionally wrecked me. Ashley Herring Blake does such an amazing job of describing grief and anxiety that I could feel it at times. And I was reading this at a time where I was also dealing with grief of my own, so it was especially poignant, and it just made me sob. Hazel goes through so much in this book, and my heart broke for her as I watched her struggle with her grief and her anxiety. I really liked seeing her relationship with Lemon develop. I liked her relationship with her mama, and learning more about her life when her moms were alive and how that differs from where she is now, how her mama has changed since losing her mom. And it was just such an amazingly brilliant book, and I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because it was so good at drawing those emotions out. Another brilliant story by Ashley Herring Blake, and if you like middle grade contemporary, you should 1000% pick this up because it is beautiful. Just remember, there is grief and there is anxiety, and it is very, very well written. So make sure you're in a headspace where you can handle reading about those topics because, like I said, they were so well done that I could literally feel them coming off the page. Next, Orphan 11. This follows a group of orphans. There are 4 of them, but our POV is Lucy. And Lucy is mute. She does not speak. Life at the orphanage kind of ripped that away from her and made it so she no longer wanted to talk. And when she and the other orphans run away, they try to join a circus. And Lucy has to fight to be able to join the circus because as somebody who will not speak, it is very dangerous for her to be there because there are wild animals and a lot of things going on and she needs to be able to communicate. And because she doesn't speak, it is dangerous. So she is doing her darndest to convince the circus to let her stay. At the same time, the orphanage is searching for these kids and they're trying to stay out of sight and one step ahead of the orphanage because they definitely 100% do not want to go back. This book had such found family vibes because you see Lucy and the other orphans who have escaped this horrible situation. And They have a very interesting relationship, the four of them, and I think it is intriguing to see how that relationship changes throughout the story, because it was definitely interesting to see how being at the circus and away from the orphanage affected each and every one of them, because I feel like they all changed post leaving the orphanage and ending up at the circus. I also really loved the relationships they'd started to develop with various members of the circus, and I thought Lucy was the perfect person to be narrating this story because she saw so much and felt so much despite the fact that she was not verbally communicating. And I love that we had a main character who was mute and we got to see that represented on the page. I also loved the vibes of the circus and the fun the kids had there, despite it being a job and a place that could be at times dangerous. This was just a really amazing story that, like I said, had lots of found family, lots of heartfelt conversations, and just such an interesting path as we learned how Lucy came to be mute and how she worked to try to find a new home for herself where she could maybe be herself again. Absolutely love this and definitely want to read more from this author in the future because I had such a good time with this one. Next, I'm going to mention The Lost Year by Catherine Marsh. This was my very first 5-star of the entire year. This is a historical fiction that has several timelines. Our main timeline is Matthew, and he is currently living in 2020 with his great-grandmother, who he calls Gigi, and his mom. And the pandemic has happened, and he is struggling with that because his dad is, I believe, in Paris, and he has no idea when he's going to see his dad again and is worried about whether his dad is going to be able to stay safe. He gets in trouble with his mom and ends up having to help his Gigi sort through her things and ends up learning about her life before she was a mom, let alone a grandma or a great-grandma, which leads us to our second timeline, which is in the 1930s and is in Ukraine during the Holodomor. And I had no idea what that was before I read this book. So the Holodomor happened, like I said, during the 1930s in Ukraine when the Soviet Union starved the people of Ukraine. And for years, nobody knew the truth of what was happening in Ukraine to these people. And it was just heartbreaking to learn about and definitely made me wonder how many stories like that will come out 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 years from now about maybe the current war with Ukraine and Russia, or the situation that is going on in Gaza, or just situations that we legitimately don't even know about because mainstream media is not talking about it, and the littler accounts or journalists that are talking about it just do not have the reach to let everybody know. Because one of the things in the Holodomor was that there were journalists that did have access, that did know what was going on, but they lied so that they can continue to keep their access. And just how mind-blowing it was that that was a thing that happened. So we see, like I said, 1930s Ukraine. And we also follow a girl, I believe, who was in Brooklyn around the same time the Holodomor was going on. So we have those three POVs, is we're following a girl in Ukraine during the Holodomor, we're following a girl in Brooklyn during the Holodomor, and then we have Matthew in 2020, who is learning about this from his great-grandmother as he's helping her kind of sort through her things during the pandemic. And there are definitely parallels between the pandemic and the Holodomor, and it was really interesting to see those kinds of parallels. This book has definitely stuck with me. I think it does a really great job at describing the realities of the situation in Ukraine. I thought it did the pandemic really well. I still struggle reading about books that are set during the pandemic, and I thought this one was done very, very well in a way that it captured the reality but wouldn't necessarily be super triggering, which I think was why I was able to enjoy it. And again, I liked the connections it built between the two timelines. I also know that the author's note mentioned that the author had relatives who were in Ukraine during this time period. I believe her grandmother maybe had left her family members, her siblings, in Ukraine and immigrated to the States. And then this started happening. So the author grew up with these stories, and I think that was such an interesting thing to read about in the author's note, and to know that the author had a personal connection to this, which made it even more important for her to tell the story. I thought this was a very impactful middle grade, a very eye-opening middle grade, and it definitely made me think about current events and what's going on in the world that we may one, not even know about, like I said, because it just hasn't been brought to the attention of most people. And two, how much we actually know about a situation, because it all depends on whether the information we are getting is accurate. And if we've learned anything since the rise of social media and, of course, AI, that you can't necessarily trust anything you read on the internet anymore because you have no idea whether it's true or not. So I thought it was, like I said, very eye-opening and very timely that I read it when I did, and would highly recommend it if you like historical fictions and would like to learn more about the Holodomor, because I think it did a very good job of explaining the real life tragedy that it was. And then the final book I've picked for my top 5 standalones of 2024, we're going to end on a slightly happier note, is The Man, Not Your Average Girl by Becky Lynch. So this is Becky Lynch's autobiography. And if you don't know, Becky Lynch is a wrestler, and I really enjoy her. And she tells her story, how she got into wrestling, what her life was like growing up, what it was like to actually make it to the big time and how that felt, and how she ended up where she is now, being, you know, the man. My goodness, is Becky relatable. One of the things I loved the most about this was how real Becky felt after reading this. She does such a good job at really making herself feel like a real person, and separating Becky Lynch, the character she plays on TV, from Rebecca Quinn, the real life person that she is. And I loved getting to meet this side of her. She also narrates the audiobook, and I think it is just absolutely brilliant. Like I said, she does such an amazing job of kind of letting us into her head. And there are moments where, like, she talks about feeling insecure or uncomfortable in her skin and unsure of herself. And it just felt so relatable. And I think I like Becky even more after having read this, because she just really feels down to earth and chill and just like such a real life, genuine person. And like I said, it was really interesting to also see the differences between the character she plays and the person behind the character. So I thought that was really interesting. I liked the different stories she chose to tell throughout this book. And it was fun getting to hear her journey and to see how she went from a small wrestling school in Ireland to the biggest wrestling company in the world and being one of the most famous names in said wrestling company. So I had a wonderful time with this. And if you want to read it, definitely check out the audiobook, because I think it definitely helps bring it to life hearing it in Becky's voice. So there you have it. Those were my top 5 standalones of 2024. Very, very eclectic mix. And like I said, it was really hard to narrow down. There were 2 others that were this close, and I went with my gut and went with these 5. So those are my top 5 standalones that I read in the year 2024. What was your favorite standalone you read in 2024? Let me know in the comment section below. All of my social media is linked in the description below if you'd like to come chat with me. If you've made it this far in the video, leave me emojis relating to the circus. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!